Hey everybody, you've got the one and only Marcel. I've been trying to get back into the rhythm of making content. At the end of the video, I will get into some of the things I've been doing and some of the stuff that's happened. Bear with me if I seem a bit rusty. I'm trying to force myself back into a rhythm without getting so critical of my content that I don't publish anything. If I don't start making videos, I'm not going to get better at it, right? They'll start smoothing out after I upload a few more. For today's topic, I want to cover some of the experiences I've had helping people with advice and how some of that advice can come across to those who don't already have the red pill knowledge that most of us do. See, if you track my channel back to its roots, it's always been a goal and ambition of mine to help people. Now, naturally, my advice is going to help some more than others, but in the end, if people start making better decisions and in some cases stand up for themselves, it ultimately helps everyone, kind of a trickle-down effect. One of the biggest struggles for me is I've got to find ways to help my friends, coworkers, heck, even some of my family without outright doxing myself. I mean, I can't recommend people to watch like Sandman, TFM, Howard Dare, some of these other big channels. I can't just say, hey, watch these guys, because their searches could ultimately lead them back to me. So I have to find creative ways to help people that I'm around and actually make a difference to them directly without having them know who I am or what I'm doing. That can be pretty frustrating because, in the end, I've put several hundred hours into this channel and I can't just say, here, listen to this video. I've already done the work for you. It's all played out right there. I can't do that. So for those around me, the ones that I'm trying to give advice to, it almost feels like I'm laying out breadcrumbs for them, trying to lead them to the correct answers without, directly telling them what I think about their relationships and their experiences. Now, of course, depending on the environment you're working in and who you're talking to, you can't always tell them directly. First of all, at least in my case, being in a position of authority, I can't ever encourage someone away from a relationship. And, in the end, I wouldn't do that anyway. You kind of have to let them make their own decisions. It's always best to appear neutral. Furthermore, if the relationship succeeds, they could resent you at least in some degree because you tried to steer them away from it. If it doesn't succeed, then there's the possibility they might turn against you because you may have encouraged that negative outcome to happen. It may be negative from their perspective, not from people looking in from the outside. One of the guys that I've been working with for a while now, a matter of years, has, basically the most cookie cutter example of a toxic marriage that I could ever come up with. It had all the same red flags that we talk about in so many of our videos. It was a perfect example of a bad marriage. And it wouldn't have taken a MGTOW or a red-pilled person that was nearby them to point that out to him. All of his friends, all the people he was working with were telling him the same thing, that he needs to duck out as soon as possible. A little bit of context. So, guy marries this woman. They're both heavily religious. Not that there's anything against that. But as their marriage progresses, like right after they got married, she instantly stopped taking care of herself. Not to the degree of lack of exercise, but literally started shoving cake in her mouth. It was almost comical talking to him about it too. I asked him what was going wrong. Was she shoveling a bunch of cake in her mouth? And he said, yeah, she actually is. Literally cake, too. How did you know that? In the essence of time, I'll break down some of the points that this guy was going through within his marriage, his relationship. She started pounding sweets and stopped taking care of herself the day they got married. Within a period of months, she started pressuring him to have kids, to buy a bigger, more expensive house, to basically fulfill all of her needs. She racked up all of her credit cards, demanded a several $1,000 ring for the wedding, which I guess may have come slightly before that. The summary of the first major time I gave him advice was under no circumstances get this woman pregnant and buy a overpriced expensive house. Of course, I suggested this under the pretense of him not being able to afford it based on the knowledge of his finances, which he told me. Also worth mentioning this point, he was already saying that the relationship was having difficulties and was concerned that it might lead to divorce because that thing was just going to get split in half or immediately taken to her as soon as they got a divorce. Heads up, I knew this was going to lead to a divorce from the get-go. There was no way that relationship was going to survive. No matter what anybody said to him or did for him, she was planning on milking this guy. Nothing in the bedroom was happening after they got married. The minute they put a ring on it, it all stopped. The bedroom went to total bed death. No sex. She cut him off from all of his friends, basically said they were all toxic for him. When their marriage started to crumble around them, because she wasn't getting the stuff that she wanted, they decided to go to counseling therapy, saw a female therapist that took her side on everything. Wouldn't hear out his side of the story on anything. She demanded that he stop any looking at dirty videos online. The wife, not the therapist. It was part of the reason they actually went to therapy in the first place was because he looked at videos. Anything at all that would give him any relief from his sexual tension that she was causing the whole time, either by telling him no or by her physical appearance. Apparently she was appalling, like she actually stopped showering properly and stuff. Though from our conversations, it sounded like he would have been down anyway simply because she was his wife. Hell, if he can grab a snorkel and dive in, more power to him. I don't think I could, wife or not. Moving on. Anything that would have been a form of relief for him was banned in the household. The reason why she got away with it is based on their religion. She claimed that it was basically cheating on her, looking at other women. Kind of a side note on that, I asked him at one point, I was like, well, does she have toys? Does she use her own version of that, a toy? And he goes, well, yeah. I was like, well, was that modeled after your anatomy? Well, no, of course not. Okay, so how is that any different than you looking at a video? Kind of an aha moment for him. So as the relationship gradually degraded further, she ended up moving out, moving in with her parents, who of course supported her in everything that she wanted to do, and were wholeheartedly against him and criticized him at every possible term. That guy honestly was kind of a pushover. Unusually enough, before she ultimately requested a divorce, she was trying to get him to agree to have her family, her parents specifically, move in with him so they would no longer have to pay for a house. Her parents were retired and living off a small fortune. They had tons of money. They didn't need that kind of help. And as a side note, apparently his parents were living out of a small trailer. So if anybody had needed help, it was them. Here they are, their relationship's on the rocks, their marriage is on the rocks, and she's trying to bring her family in the house with him? And the best thing I can think of is that it was, allies on her side. That they were trying to, make him out to be a bad guy as much as possible to kind of gain favor in the courts or to take advantage of the situation. Maybe they just wanted to mooch off him. Perhaps try and push him out of the household where he's paying for it but can't stand to be there most of the time because he can't stand them. Good a theory as any. Now, I won't say that I've ever been in a situation quite that bad with my relationships, at least as far as getting taken advantage of. The women that I was with were never that obvious about stuff. And maybe the relationships were just as bad, but it wasn't as blunt. So a lot of the people he was talking to about what was going on in his life could see most of that stuff coming. I had it hammered down. I knew exactly what was going to happen with him before it ever did, because they're patterns that we've all talked about 100 times. People in our community would already know what's going to happen. Long story short, and to prevent myself from coming across as one-sided, whenever I gave him advice or described how I interpreted what he was going through, I always put it in several different ways of what could be happening. And one of those ways was the correct answer. For example, when he said that his wife was putting on all this weight suddenly, I mentioned the possibility that it could be something medical. She could be dealing with some stress in her life that was causing it, or it's possible that she just considers that she's got him trapped and that he's not going to be able to leave her and doesn't care. On the context of him losing all of her interest in the bedroom, aside from the fact that she'd gained 100 pounds and he was no longer interested in her, the lack of any interest at all from her end on that could be possibility A, B, or maybe even that she thinks you're not going to leave her and that she can get away with it, that it was never her intention to sleep with you after you got married, aside from making children. Funny thought on the side of that too. You know how many married guys don't get laid? Being married. It's like the sex stops the minute they put a ring on her finger. Because of what I do for a living, I talk to probably about 100 married men in a month, and out of that, probably about 85 of them would claim that they have issues in the bedroom. Now, I don't automatically assume that's intentional. It's probably more to do with the dynamic of the roles a man plays. Once they're married, there's a change in what's expected of him. He becomes almost like a workhorse for the household, which means there's less time for romance and less time to fool around. All the same, how often is this whole we need to wait until after marriage, bedroom door opening up things kind of spun as a reward for getting married, only to find out that it tapers off almost immediately? Don't take my word for it. Married guys complain all the time about not getting enough sex or it being used as a tool to manipulate them. Granted, people around me are more inclined to open up with me because it's part of my job. Number one complaint of married men has to typically do with either issues with their marriage, issues with their wife, infidelity from their wife. It all revolves around relationship problems, and that seeps into everything else in their career and causes problems everywhere else in their life. It causes them stress in so many ways. The ones who don't understand that it has to do with their relationship will typically say that it has to do with money or finances. And when you ask them what they need the money or finances for, it's for a vacation for their wife or something for the family that's going to cost them a heap of money. And for women, it's almost always my man isn't doing enough. Like, I'm not seeing ways to feel his love. He's not expressing it to me in a way I understand. He needs to prove his love to me better. The solution that's always peddled to men is try harder, and to women it's always find a better man. Before someone tries to tell me that I'm generalizing, imagine a therapist looking at a woman and telling her she needs to try harder, and looking at a man and saying you should just go find a new girlfriend. How often does that feel like it would happen? Would that be out of place? Anyway, for a simple summary of what I'm trying to get at here, when I was giving people that I was working with and all the other ones that were around me advice, especially those I was expected to mentor, I would always try and give possibilities for all the scenarios I could see likely happening, the outcomes of those scenarios, and what their options might be on how to handle each of them, without directly saying what they should or should not do or tying any of it back to our ideology. And then lay it on them to choose what they wanted to believe was the most likely possibility, even if I knew what was going to happen. And I found that in those specific types of problems, I was right maybe 90% of the time. Now, obviously, I've invested a lot of mental energy into studying relationships and romantic dynamics and the way people treat each other, so you see the flags a lot quicker after that. And you'll pick up on things that people won't, at least not right away. So it's pretty easy to seem psychic. Imagine 90% odds on making bets or gambling. Or if a therapist were right 90% of the time. Now, I'm willing to acknowledge that the people that came to me specifically for help and already had a problem that they were dealing with, so that there might be an intrinsic bias that comes from that in my data of who I interacted with. Furthermore, the nature of my experiences in the past might have tainted my view of what I'm actually seeing. Like maybe it is that he's a dirtbag guy and just doesn't make enough money. I guess that's possible. But that's not really what I'm seeing. And it ultimately doesn't matter because the people that I've spoken to that have followed my advice to some degree that I've interacted with afterwards have seemed happier. Like they've accomplished more given the choices that I suggested to them, and they made the right decisions. I suppose what I'm getting at with all of this is I'm attempting to tailor the really harsh advice that comes across here in our community to where I can squeeze it under the radar in a feminist society that wouldn't tolerate anything regarding the women involved accepting some sort of responsibility for the problems within a relationship. It's a slow process when it would be so much easier to say, just here, dude, read this article, watch this video. It'll clear it all up. It's a work in progress. In the meantime, let me know down below what your experiences have been. Have you ever tried to reach out to someone with a red pill and gotten it thrown back in your face? Maybe they took your advice and it helped. I'd like to hear your experiences. Now, as promised, as for where I've been for the last couple of months, I took a new job. It's given me a lot more responsibility and a lot more work. I'm getting so sick of schools. Coupled with that, I had that job I was working on the side that was paying me more than I was earning in the other 2 jobs that I was doing. Yeah, that other job completely crapped the bed. Gone. Lost that revenue down about 90%, and that was right around the same time frame-ish that this whole YouTube purge thing happened, where, we all lost our monetization for the most part. I'm about to make a test video, one that's going to be on lucid dreaming. It'll be interesting, but it won't be MGTOW related, and I'm doing that on purpose to see whether or not they'll block it from monetization. There won't be anything in it politically charged, so I'll know whether or not it's a bias against all of my videos, or if it's just something that they're doing with tags. It's a way for me to troubleshoot what's going on. But that's about all I have to discuss for today. Let me know down below what you think. I want to hear your thoughts. Anyways, until next time, this has been Marcel.